In today's video, we're going to do a recap of the Jason Lee interview with DeBarge and Charlie Wilson. But before we get into that, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Also become a channel member, support. Also give me a like, thumbs up, comment. Well, a few weeks ago, Jason Lee did an interview with Charlie Wilson and DeBarge. Now, you have to pay for that interview. It's on the Zeus Network. So I watched it. I pretty much didn't learn anything new, about either one of them. In today's video, we're going to focus on DeBarge, but it's just hearing their take or perspective on the questions. They were each asked, the same questions, so they gave their take. So we're going to focus on DeBarge. Now, he was asked about the sampling because their music is very sampled. And DeBarge said, he didn't mind as long as it was done in good taste. He was asked, was he getting paid for it? And he said, yeah. So there's the sampling question. And also he felt positive about the music today and that rap, everything was great. They're doing a great job. So that's how he feels about the sampling and music today. Again, this is from DeBarge. I'm just paraphrasing what he was asked. Now, Jason Lee also, got, a little personal. He asked them about their relationships. Charlie Wilson has been married for about 30 years or something like that, a very long time. And DeBarge, Jason Lee said it's a bit more private in his relationships. But DeBarge said, you look a little harder, you'll find something. He didn't want to make them famous for nothing. And he just basically said, like, if you're in his past, that's where you belong. So that was his answer to the relationship. Comment below what you guys think. Next, he was asked, about Beyonce and Michael Jackson. That was kind of like a highlight. Who's better? Who's greater? And they kind of laughed like they really didn't want to kind of answer it or get in trouble by, I guess, saying the wrong thing. But I think they ended up saying Michael Jackson. But they were pretty much saying, each generation has their own great, I guess, icon, whatever. DeBarge kind of laughed and joked that Beyonce was his daughter because that was the internet rumor. Comment below if you've heard that. But what do you guys think? Who's better? Who's greater, Michael Jackson or Beyonce? I'm going to say Michael Jackson. Next, Charlie Wilson has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and DeBarge does not. Which I said that years ago when I went to the Hollywood Walk of Fame. I'm like, where's his star? But Jason Lee asked him, well, how do you do you feel like you've been given the credit you deserve, the acknowledgement? And he basically says he's just here, he's grateful. And he told a story about, DeBarge going to the studio into Berry Gordy's house, and, and they didn't know that they were popular. They went to a record store and there was a long line of people waiting for them, and they didn't know it was for them. So he told that story about how he feels about, acknowledgement and credit. Next, they were both asked about, the rugs. You guys know what that is. And, Charlie Wilson told his story, and then DeBarge basically told his, simply saying, that he looked at his family and they couldn't put it down. They weren't coming to the studio. And so he wanted to prove something to them, like, well, he could do it and put it down, but it just didn't happen that way. It's a spiritual journey, and it's something that, you need God, which is very true. Next, they were asked about Whitney Houston. And of course, we all saw that moment years ago between DeBarge and Whitney Houston. They were hugging, and that's what he spoke about, that she did say something to him that he promised he wouldn't say. But I think she was saying that in that moment she loved him or needed him or something like that, and that he was going to call her the next day. But of course, he wasn't able to do so because, of course, she passed. Next, Jason Lee did ask DeBarge what his creative process is. Now, Charlie Wilson, I think that's when he spoke about his wife and how I think, everything has to run by her as far as, in the studio, the songs that he creates. But for DeBarge, I think he was saying that, it's people and vibes, and he could write a song, even in that moment. They played a game towards the end or midway through the interview where they showed different celebrities, and they were each asked, how they feel about that celebrity. So when they show Michael Jackson, for instance, El DeBarge was like, he told a story about how he presented him something like an award or something, and then backstage, Michael was talking to someone, and he didn't think Michael kind of noticed him, but Michael did and said, he was a great singer. So he shared that story. When they showed a picture of Janet, uh, El DeBarge did mention James DeBarge, his brother, and how Janet would call him El DeBarge, I guess, early in the morning looking for James. And basically, he was saying that, Janet was a sweet girl, I guess, at the time. And she just wanted help finding James. And, James was being a man. He was really young. He was 18. So that was that. I don't think he really answered the question, do they have a baby? Charlie Wilson answered and said probably. Like I said, some of the questions they kind of didn't want to answer. They kind of laughed a lot in the interview. Um, like I said, if I didn't say it before, I really didn't learn anything new. It was just here and there take. I will say what was interesting, the story that El DeBarge told about Snoop Dogg, and I when he was asked that question and went into that, I had about 20 questions just from that story that I would love to have asked El DeBarge, and I think Jason Lee, he missed that opportunity. But anyway, as far as DeBarge, he did say that James and Chico were doing good, and of course, a few weeks ago we heard about Chico in the news, but El DeBarge said that he was doing good and that they're working on a reunion. So that's pretty much the interview, you guys. Oh, there was another thing. He asked Jason Lee about El DeBarge's, 12 children, which I actually thought it was more. Comment below if you guys, I don't know the number, but, this was kind of a little controversial. I think in the comments people were like, I don't know about that, but El DeBarge said that it was the females and they had an idea or they had a plan and they were getting pregnant, and it's not his fault. What do you guys think? Anyway, that's the interview. Comment below.